Hello everyone, how are you all doing? I'm really wishing that you are all doing fine and hopefully you are trying to do your best in order to answer your activities and assessments in your module. Honestly, right now, when we are having a surge of cases of COVID-19 here in a province, it's better that you students must stay at home. You must think first that even if you are young and you think you might be able to overcome the virus, however, you must also have to think about your family members, most especially your mothers, your fathers, your aunts, uncles, lolas, and those people who are older than you. So, for you, in order to instill that sense of responsibility upon yourselves, you must think that in this pandemic, it should not be always about you. It should be always about your community, about your family. So that's why it's very important for you right now to really just stay at home. And what I can advise to you actually, for you to stay away from boredom is to, aside from watching a lot of TVs, watching dramas, you study. That's the purpose why we are still continuing with our education, although it's in a modular format or an online format. Given that it's very important that you still need to study, even if you are required to stay home. So, for you to better enjoy this quarantine, but quarantine aren't supposed to be enjoyed, for you to better to somehow stay away from boredom, do your best in studying. Read your books, read your modules, research some more information that is provided in your module, and then do well in your assessments and examinations. Through that way, you'll realize that things will just come in fast. I mean, right now we're having a surge, but maybe in the next month, everything will be okay. So while waiting for these cases to be stabilized in our province, you must also do your part. Okay? So much for that pep talk. I think it's very important for us right now to also discuss about our class. And I think now we are already here in lesson 3. In lesson 3, we are about to discuss the state principles as stated in our Philippine Constitution, and at the same time, we're also gonna talk about the citizenship here in the Philippines. Who are the Filipino citizens? So these are the things that we are about to discuss in this lesson. But just to give you a short recap on our lesson 2, we were already able to discuss about the historical development of our Philippine Constitution. You all know that in our history, we started with the Malolos Constitution, then we have the 1935 Malolos Constitution, and then it was followed by the 1973 Martial Law Constitution, then the 1986 Freedom Constitution, and currently we have the 1987 Constitution, the one which is being used by our government. And also we are able to talk about the preamble as embodied in the Philippine Constitution. And again, the preamble is just a mere statement of the sentiments of the Filipino people who are the source of the powers as granted in the Philippine Constitution. So it does not vest any rights. However, it reminds us of who are the sources or who is the source of our rights or powers granted in the Philippine Constitution. At the same time, the preamble reminds us on the ends or what are the purpose why we wanted to build this why we wanted to draft this constitution. So if you remember, we wanted to build a just and humane society, and at the same time, we wanted to build a government that should embody our aspirations and ideas. So those kinds of things, I think you have really learned them because I was checking your preliminary examinations, and most of you were able to get those questions and I'm really happy that you really did well in your examination. So hopefully you will still listen in this discussion. Take down notes, please, because again, the things that I'll be discussing in this lesson would also come out in your midterm examination, which we already scheduled. So with that, I say good luck and hopefully you will listen to my discussion. So let's start with our discussion in lesson 3. And we will be starting with the state principles under the Philippine Constitution. So to begin our lecture, first we have here the first state principle as stated in our Philippine Constitution. It says sovereignty resides in all the people and all government authority emanates from them. There's many things actually that we have to consider under this principle. First, we have to recognize the principle of republicanism. So I've been talking about what is a republican form of government, and it's actually a representative style of government wherein people would elect their representatives in order to represent them in the government, and in turn these people whom we have elected as our representatives in the government would actually serve us. And the thing is, along with this is the principle of accountability. These government officials that we are elected are actually mandated to serve the Filipino people. We have granted them these powers. They cannot be seated in the government in their position right now without us voting us. It is us who gave them these powers in the government. But the thing is, some of them would just abuse these powers by doing a lot of corruptions in the government. That's why they must be held accountable in their wrongdoings. So that's why we have some administrative laws that would somehow punish them and give them um, any forms of penalties if ever they will be able to commit some crimes or some lapses in relation to their function as government officials. So that's why it's very important for you to be very critical with this government officials that we have, because these people are supposed to be expected or are expected to serve us. We should not serve these people. They should not be given that much powers. In fact, they should be the one who should be serving us, who should be giving, they should be performing well in their functions as government officials so that they can return back what we have given to them. They have been given, they have been seated in the power, and it's their obligation to give back to us the things that we have given them. So we must be always be critical on this, on the actions of our government officials, because they must know or they must think that this power that has been granted to them came from us. So the real sovereignty is not with our government, but rather the real power of sovereignty is from the Filipino people. So we should be the persons, or we should be the ones who should be served by these government officials and not the other way around. So they should not be given that much privileges. Okay, and then another principle that is actually related to the principle, to this state principle, is actually the principle on the separation of powers, and at the same time the principles of checks and balances. I think I've already discussed it to you that the separation of powers, first, we have to understand that there are three branches of the government: the executive department, the legislative department, and the judiciary department. And these three departments are not allowed to encroach the power of each other. In fact, these three powers should not be saturated in a single department. It should be spread out evenly for proper functioning, for proper there must be proper function and performance of duties amongst those who are in this department. So that's why it's very important that there must be separation of powers. They must not encroach the powers of each other. At the same time, their powers must not be they cannot encroach at the same time. They should not be vested to another department, because the Philippine Constitution has actually specifically stated that these powers must only be performed by the members of the specific departments. So since it has been delegated in the Philippine Constitution, it cannot be further delegated anymore by a mere law. So that's why it's very important. There must be separation of powers in our government, and you can only perform or you can only function on the powers that has been granted to you by the Philippine Constitution. And then also we have the principles of checks and balances. It says that even if there is separation of powers, there must also be accountability. As I've mentioned, these government officials must be accountable to their actions. So that's why the other departments, although they cannot encroach the power of the others, but they can look into the actions, they can look into the performance of the duties of these other departments and see to it that they are functioning really well. So as an example that I've kept mentioning is that it's the legislative department who will create a bill, and then this bill will be passed to the president, who will then veto or reject or approve this bill. And if ever it will be approved by the president, it will turn into a law. However, if some people would file a petition, then the judiciary department can look into this law that has been granted and has been approved by the president, and then the judiciary can declare this law as unconstitutional. So that's one example of principles of check and balances that is being practiced by our government. There are also other things that where we can see some examples of the principles of checks and balances. For example, those appointments by the president, the appointees of the presidents cannot be officially seated in their positions unless they have been concurred by the Commission on Appointments. And that power, the Commission Appointment, the power of the Commission of Appointment is actually vested with the House of Congress, or under the House of Representatives, or that's under the legislative branch. And the thing is, these members of the legislative can actually also reject or approve these appointments by the president. So unless you have been appointed or your appointment has been approved by the legislative department under the Commission on Appointments, then that's the only time that you can really sit in the positions that has been appointed, in the position that has been appointed to you by the Philippine president. And another example of the practice of principles of check and balances is when, the judiciary department is the one that has been tasked to interpret laws and at the same time to grant judgment on several penal laws or on crime. So if ever a person commits a crime, it's the judicial department that would actually grant judgment on these crimes that has been committed by the people. But the thing is, the power has actually the Philippine president has actually the power to set aside these decisions of the court, and the Philippine president has the power to pardon or give amnesty to these criminals that has already been judged by the judiciary department. So that's also a way of practicing the principle of checks and balances. So those are actually the things that can be discussed about the principle of republicanism under this principle of sovereignty. So let's proceed. The second principle we have here is the civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. So as mentioned in section 3 of the Philippine Constitution, under state policies, it says that the civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military, and that the armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people of the state, and its goal is to secure the sovereignty of the state and the integrity of the national territory. So we have to consider that civilian authority is always supreme over the military. So that's why the military has the obligation to protect the interests of the Filipino people. And that is because the Filipino people is the source of the sovereignty of the Philippines. So somehow it's very important that we should, it's very important that the military should protect the interests of the Filipino people. That's why if ever the Philippine president or some officials of our government, if ever they would commit some form of abuses or corruptions, and that those kind of abuses would actually hurt the Filipino people, the military would always have the responsibility or the obligation to protect the Filipino people from being hurt from these abuses. So that's why it's very important that the interest of the people is always, always supreme over the interest of this official. So if ever the military has to choose between the government and the people, it should be the people that should be protected first rather than the government, because what is important is that what is more important is the interest of the Filipino people. Civilian authority is all-time supreme. In fact, the government must heed to civilian authority because the main purpose of our government is to serve and protect the interests of the Filipino people. So when the rights or when there is clashes between the Philippine government and the civilian, it should be the civilian that should be protected. Ideally, that's how it should be under our Philippine Constitution, because again, civilian authority is all time supreme over the military. So for our next principle, we have renunciation of war as an instrument of national policy. So here in this in this principle, we have to consider that the Philippines can never declare war against other countries. So if you've been listening to news, you've seen that there is a war going on between Egypt and Israel and Palestine, and you can actually see those missiles flying, being dropped in Israel. And the thing is, that's actually a form of war, and we cannot actually do that here in the Philippines. We cannot go against any other country because we had, under our constitution, we have renounced war. So we cannot actually go to war against other country. However, in situations like, for example, what is happening right now, China. So there's actually been a dispute between China and the Philippines over the possession of the West Philippine Sea. The thing is, people are talking about war. So what if China will go to war against the Philippines and they will attack us? Can we go against them? Can we go in a war against them? And the answer is yes, we can really do, because we are just protecting our nation. We are just protecting the integrity of our state. And the thing is, what has been renounced in this state principle is the aggressive form of war, meaning we are the aggressor, we started the war. But the thing is, if we're talking about defensive war, where we are just defending our territory, then we can actually do so, because in fact, under the Constitution, the Congress can actually declare a state of war. So we can declare that a war has been happening here in our country, but we cannot go to war against another country. We can only defend our nation once we are under being attacked by other nation. So again, what we are talking here is about aggressive war. We cannot attack another nation. We cannot be the aggressor of a war. However, we can defend during a war. So that's why we still have our military to protect us. So the next principle under the state policy under the Constitution is that the prime duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. So you have to understand that the government has prime duty. The prime duty is first to serve the people, to serve the Philippine people, because that's actually their duty. We have given them this power to be seated in this position in the government. So in return, they must serve us because we are the source of the sovereignty. And what they should be doing is to protect the integrity of our nation. So so again, the prime duty of the government is to first serve the people, and the second prime duty of the government is to protect the people. So these are the two main functions of our government, to serve and protect the people. So how can our government comply this duty? First, we have to understand that the government may call upon the people to defend a state. So the government may require, through a law, they may require all citizens under conditions provided by law to run their personal military service. So if you're quite familiar with your OPAS, you know the Koreans, male Koreans are actually required to run their obligatory military service for at least 1.5 years to 2 years. 1.5 years to 2 years. So actually, the Philippine government may call upon. So although it's not required, but the Philippine government can actually create laws that would grant obligatory military service for Filipino people. So that's one way of complying with this duty. Complying with this duty. And then also the Philippine government may use the armed forces of the Philippines to repel any threat to security. So that's why when, as I mentioned earlier, when a nation attacks our country, we should be defended by our armed forces of the Philippines. And if you're quite familiar with what is happening in Mindanao, where there are a lot of rebellion that is happening, a lot of war that is happening in Mindanao, it's always our armed forces of the Philippines, armed forces, the military, that they are the ones that are often called to repel or to fight off those things that are happening there. So that's why it's very important for us to have a very strong military. So that's why more funds should have been given to the military so that we can train better soldiers. At the same time, we should have state-of-the-art facilities and state-of-the-art machineries in order for our military or an armed forces to sustain if ever there are threats to our security in the country. So that's why it's also very important to establish a very strong military so that there would be people who would defend us in times of problems or in times of calamities or in times of threats. So the next principle is the promotion of general welfare and maintenance of peace and order. So being a democratic state, the Filipino people must be able to enjoy. The Filipino people must be able to enjoy the blessings of democracy. And in order for us to enjoy these blessings of democracy, there are three things that are very important. The first one is that there must be maintenance of peace and order. Because if there will be always war, then how can we say that we are free? How can we say that we have the freedom to do everything we want if we are always under threat? So that's why there should be maintenance of peace and order. And then another thing that is very important and another essential is the protection of life, liberty, and property. So I'll be talking more about it, the protection of life, liberty, and property in our lesson 4, since it's part of our the Bill of Rights under human rights. So basically, again, it's very important that there must be protection in our life, in our liberty, and in our property. And then also there must be promotion of general welfare. And you will say general welfare it means kaayuhan sa kadaghanan. We cannot say kaayuhan sa tanan because whether we like it or not, it's not everyone who can actually enjoy these blessings of our democracy. So it's very important that instead of saying the welfare of all the people, we should be, it's enough that the general welfare is well protected. So that's part of the promotion. Again, there must be promotion of general welfare and maintenance of peace and order for us to be able to fully enjoy the blessings of democracy. And when we're talking about democracy, again, we're talking about our participation in nation building. And at the same time, we're also talking about when we talk about democracy, we should take part in nation building through these people that we have selected as our representatives in the government. So in turn, these people should know how to should help us in maintaining peace and order, in protecting our life, liberty, and property, and in maintaining the peace and order in our country. So for the next slide, we have the separation of the church and the state. So I've mentioned earlier that in the historical development of our Philippine Constitution, it all started in the Malolos Constitution, where we started the separation of the church and the state. Because if you remember, at the time during the Spanish rule, the church has been given so much powers when in fact they are actually meddling with the functions of the government. In fact, the church at the time has actually a say in nation building, and they have a say in governance. However, now that we are in the modern times and people are allowed to express their beliefs, to believe in any God, in any religion that they want, there should always be separation of church and state, because the government should not favor one religion and discriminate others. And at the same time, the church must not impose their beliefs, their convictions on the state and the rest of the citizenry, because again, it's part of our sovereignty. We have been given freedom to express ourselves. We have been given freedom to believe in anything that we want. So the church and the state must be separated, because some beliefs of the church, of a single church, is not the belief of other people. There are things that we believe in the Catholic Church that is not being practiced by another religion, like in Islam or in INC, which is also another religion in our country. So basically, these things, in order for the government to stay away from any forms of conflicts with this religion, they must not favor a single religion and discriminate the other. And at the same time, the church must not impose their beliefs. And in fact, under this the separation of church and state, the state cannot also establish a religion. So we have the non-establishment clause, which means a state cannot establish another religion for its people to believe in. So that's why the matters of the state should be left with the state, and the matters of the church should be left with the church. So that's it. So no church is allowed to impose its beliefs, its convictions, and its traditions to the society, to our community, because we are given freedom to believe in everything, or to believe in everything that we want to believe in. So that's why it's very important that there must be separation between the church and the state. So we have come now to some other important state principles in the Philippine Constitution. And the first one is the Sanctity of Life. So basically, the government has actually some responsibilities in order to in connection, or they have the responsibilities in connection in this guarantee to protect the life, the family life. And the first responsibility is actually to protect and strengthen the family life, being the basic social institution. So every family, every Filipino family must be protected and strengthened by our Philippine government. And I think let me just talk about this because it's actually one way of practicing this. So in annulment cases, kung kanang mag-file og annulment ang mga couple, so they want to annul their marriage. Actually, even if they are already annulled, the state prosecutor, the Philippine state, through our prosecutor, can actually look into these annulment cases, and if they see that there has been corroboration, or that it seems like the judge has not uh, taken into account all the facts of the case, then the prosecutor of the state can actually file for an appeal in the higher courts in order to question this annulment of cases. So basically, dili jud siya sa iyon if you want to annul your marriage. So you have to think twice if you want to annul your marriage, good, because aside from, even if there's mutual agreement between the spouses that they want their marriage to be annulled, and it will take years under our courts to render your marriage annulled, because you have to go through a lot of hearings, trials, just to have just to get that decree of to get that decree of annulment for your marriage. The state, our state, through our prosecutors, can look into this annulment cases, and if they feel like, there's the decision or the judgment is questionable, they can appeal it to the to the higher courts, like the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. And that's one way of our government in protecting our family, our Filipino families. So it's here in the Philippines, we have very strong regard to a family, because it is regarded as as the basic social institution. So there's no other thing more important than a family for every Filipino. So that's why it must be protected and it must be strengthened by our government. And also another responsibility of our government related to the sanctity of the family life is to equally protect the life of the mother and the life of the unborn from conception. So meaning it's because of that we have been taking good care of our mothers, pregnant mothers here in our country. So our Department of Health has provided so much health services for our mothers. And then I think it's already free in our health centers. It's already free for our mothers to give birth in our health centers. That's very, very, very important. And that's why we've also been talking about family planning, because it's one way of protecting the mother, both the mother and the unborn child. So there must be proper family planning, so that in case a child has been conceived, the mother, it's already been the responsibility of the mother that the child would be given birth. It's already the responsibility of the mother to give birth to that child, and at the same time, when the mother gives birth, it's already her responsibility to take good care of the child, because she's the one she created it, and with her husband. So that's why it's very important to protect the life of the mother and the life of the unborn child. So that's also one thing that our Department of Health has always been looking into, to reduce the mortality rate of in pregnancy or in childbirth. So when you say mortality rate, meaning the rate sa mga namatay gani during childbirth. So we must decrease that number. So dapat gani o wala dyan mamatay. Nobody should die in childbirth. So our government is doing something about it because it's part of our state principle. It's stated in our constitution that that the mother and the child should be protected. And another responsibility of our government is, and I think it's not just the government, but it's also for the parents. They have, under this principle of the sanctity of family life, the parents have the duty to rear the child in order for them to grow up becoming better citizens of our country. So munang musulti kang rear the child, meaning they should nurture every child. The parents should take good care of these children. They must be responsible with the health, with the education of these children. And the government must take part in taking care of these children. So that's why the government has provided free education, elementary education, and secondary education to our children, because that's part of their services of the government in order to rear our youth in becoming better persons. And aside from that, we have been given free vaccines against some diseases to children, because that's also a responsibility of our government. So this kind of responsibility, this kind of services from our government, and some state policies and regulations that would protect every children is already a part of their action in helping every Filipino family, in helping every Filipino parents in rearing their child, so that these children will grow up into becoming a better person, into becoming better persons. So again, that's all part of the state principle of the sanctity of life. So another important state principle is the vital role of youth in nation building. So the youth must be recognized, must take part in nation building. So that's why I think you have been given free education, you have been trained into becoming better persons, and you have been trained into becoming better leaders, because that's your the youth has always have a vital role in nation building. So you have to consider, that's the very reason why we have the Sangguniang Kabataan, because as early as as in an early age, our youth must be able to participate in nation building, so that they will be trained into becoming better leaders. So one way of training you into becoming a better leader is by letting you take part in nation building through governance. And that's why we have the Sangguniang Kabataan. You can actually become leaders to your fellow youth. You can participate in creating policies in your barangay, creating ordinances in your barangay, so that you'll be able to protect the interests of youth. So that's one way of actually training you into becoming a good leader, so that because we've always been saying that the youth is the future of our nation, the youth is the future of our motherland. So since if you are the future of our motherland as early as now, at the age of 18, or at the age where you already feel like you're already responsible, then you must take charge. You must take part in governance. So that's why you have been given that opportunity to become leaders through the Sangguniang Kabataan. And I think in some other state policies also, students can our youth has always been taken care of. And I think also right now, it just came to me, one way of also promoting leadership is in schools. That's why you have student governments, because you are being trained into becoming better leaders. So again, our youth must participate in nation building, because your voices are very important too. So you must not be ignored. Your powers and your capabilities and your skills must not be ignored. because you have a lot to offer. You have so much to offer in our government. So if you will be given the opportunity to take lead and to take part in leading the people, to take part in our governance, you must take it, because that's what our constitution wanted, for you to have a good, for you to participate in nation building. And another important state principle is the role of women in nation building. So now you have to consider that women should not be discriminated. Women should be free in doing what they want to do. So that's why here in the Philippines, we already have two female presidents, Gloria Arroyo and Corazon Aquino, because we have considered the role of women in nation building. We consider their skills, their capabilities, and the things that they can do. They have also some fresh ideas, something to offer to the Filipino people. And I think it's because of their motherly love and care that they are considered as good leaders. They are compassionate leaders because they are women. So that's why if ever they are given the opportunity to take lead, they must also take lead, because we have considered the role of women in nation building. So there are certain provisions in our constitution that has recognized the role of women. So I've mentioned earlier, our government protect the life of the mothers and the unborn at the start of from conception. So basically, that's one way of protecting women. And then we have our constitution has also ensured the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. So meaning there must be equality among men. So women must be given equal opportunities to work, equal opportunities to education, equal opportunities in science, in arts, in sports, in whatever field that they wanted to do. Because again, that's part of the sovereignty. We have been given so much freedom, and that freedom must not be with men alone. So that freedom must also be shared by women. If women want to do something, then they are free to do so. And also in our labor laws, labor conditions must also think about women. So that's why we have given so much privileges to women in labor laws. We have given them maternity leave whenever they get pregnant, and during childbirth. They're, I think, given, I'm not sure if it's still 100 days or 6 months or 3 months to 6 months. I'm not sure, but then again, they're given leave. They're given time to take care of their child. And then aside from that, there have also single parents, uh, um, protection for single parents, and I think women are part of that. So they're also protected. And then for lactating matters, in our labor laws, uh, women should be lactating mothers, or this kind of women should be given a place where they can feed their children, or where they can have breastfeeding. So that's still part of that's still part of the responsibility under our government to recognize these needs and these privileges for women, because women are very much important in our nation. So that's why we have given so much privileges to them through laws and under our constitution, because we have recognized the role of women in nation building. And then the next one is the promotion of right to health of the Filipino people. Again, we are in a pandemic, and right now we are being protected. One of the example in the promotion of right to health of the Filipino people is the procurement of vaccines. No Filipino citizen has been paying to get these vaccines, because it's our government who's been paying for it, because that's the function of our government. That's their duty in order to protect our health. They must provide free vaccines for all, so that we'll be protected from this virus during this pandemic. And again, I think our Department of Health has been doing something in order to protect us from this from this pandemic. And aside from that, a part of the promotion of right to health of the people is the PhilHealth. We have this health insurance, so that once, if ever the people will get sick, then there's this institution that can provide insurance or can help us in paying our bills in the hospitals and in buying our medicines. So that's another promotion of our right to health. And then aside from that, I think the Department of Health has deployed doctors to every LGUs, local government units in every provinces. So that's one way of promoting the right of health of people, because the people must have access to our health centers. They must have access to doctors, because again, a nation with unhealthy people will never progress. We will not achieve progress. We will not achieve development in our country if the people will keep on getting sick. So that's why it's very important that we must take care of our health. We must take care of our health, and that the government does do something in order to take care of the health of the people. So another very important state principle under our Constitution that is mentioned here is the protection of the right to balance and healthful ecology. So in order for us to understand this better, we have to discuss this very interesting case on Oposa versus Factoran. So this case was in July 30, 1990. This case was actually promulgated on July 30, 1993. So I'm still 2 years old at the time, actually. Weird. But anyways, just to give a discussion on this case, this is actually very, very interesting, because Oposa is one of those minor children. It's actually a group. This is actually from a group of minor children. It's a group of minor children. They actually filed a lawsuit against Factoran. Factoran at the time was actually the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So this group of minor children, led by Oposa, filed a lawsuit, a taxpayer's lawsuit. They filed a taxpayer's lawsuit against the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to cancel all the timber licensing agreements in the Philippines. And when you say timber licensing agreements, these are the TLAs are actually the permits given to private corporations to cut down trees. So basically, you're giving permits to private corporations that are engaged in this kind of business of logging and timber. You will give them rights to actually cut down trees in our forests. So what will happen if you come to think of it, what will happen to our forests by the time if so much private corporations are given the permit to cut down trees? Eventually, big distractions would definitely happen in our country. So I think that's what these children have actually thought of. So that's why they filed this case against the Secretary of Department of Environment and Natural Resources, so that all these timber licensing agreements should be cancelled, so that no private corporation must be given the permit to cut down trees. And in his answer, Factoran, the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources at the time, in his answer he said that no, you don't have the cause of action, and who are you to file this case? So basically, these minor children, they said that they are the representative of the current generation and the future generation to come. So basically, we call this inter alia generation responsibility. So they said that they have the responsibility to the future generations to protect our environment. So that's why they are filing this case. But Factoran, the district secretary of uh, environment and natural resources, said that no, you don't have the cause of action to file this case because who are you? You are just children. And when you say cause, and let me explain that when you say cause of action, it means set of facts or allegations that are needed in order for you to file for illegal, to enforce your legal rights or to file claims against certain abuses or certain damages or for a certain crime. So basically, you must need enough cause of action for you or for you to be able to file a case. And Factoran said no, they cannot file. This case is actually moot and academic because these children do not have the cause of action to file the case against him. That's what he said in his answer to this lawsuit that has been filed by the children, the group of children led by Oposa. But the court actually said that no, Oposa, Factoran, you are not right because these minor children have actually the right to file a case against you because it is provided for in our constitution, the protection of the right to a balanced and healthy ecology. So under our constitution, it is said that the state shall protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. So basically, because of that, these children have actually just exercised their responsibility not just to themselves, not just to their generation, but they are also practicing their responsibility for the future generation to come. And that is why these children have actually the right to file a case against Factoran because every one of us, every single Filipino, through this provision under our Constitution, has the responsibility, intergenerational responsibility, or we have the responsibilities for the future generations to protect our environment because we all have a right, not just us, but for our future generations to come. We have the right to a balanced and healthful ecology. That is what is stated in our constitution. So that's why, in the end, it's the group of children, the group of Oposa who won this case. And that's why, until now, if you see something, if you have seen environmental destruction, if you have seen any form of destruction in our environment, then you have the right to file a case against anyone, even if you're not living in that area, you're not a resident of that barangay, if you're not a resident of that local government unit, you can still file a case because each one of us, every Filipino, has the right to file a case against anyone who's destroying our environment because we have a right to a balanced and healthful ecology, and it's our responsibility to maintain the rhythm and the accord and the harmony of our we have the responsibility to maintain the rhythm and harmony of our nature. So that's why we have been given the responsibility to protect our environment, not only for ourselves, but for the future generations to come. So we have to protect our forests, our natural forests, our seas, our resources, our minerals. We have to protect them. And even if we're not living in that area or someone says, who are you to say that because you're not directly affected by it? But then again, how about the future generations? They will be affected. How can they enjoy nature? How can they enjoy the gifts and the blessings of the environment if one day these things are just destroyed? So that's why it's very, very important for us to protect it. So because of this case, the Oposa versus Victoran, the writ of kalikasan has been created from this case. So that's why now we all have the responsibility to take care, of our environment, because we have the right to a balanced and healthful ecology, and we need to protect the future generations to come. We are responsible. We are responsible for ourselves, for our generation, and for the future generations. So that's so beautiful. Again, I just so love this case. That's how beautiful our law is here in the Philippines. That's very beautiful, and I think it's very important for you to learn these laws, because you have this responsibility to take care of our nation, and first you have to take care of our environment. So, I'm just loving it, sorry. So that's for the case of Oposa versus Factorian. And again, that's for the protection of the right to a balanced and healthful ecology. And then we have here another state principle is the priority to education, science, and technology, arts, culture, and sports. I think you should know that the biggest chunk, so meaning the biggest pinakadakong bahin in the funds of the Philippine government, in the budget of the Philippine government, the biggest chunk is um, provided to the Department of Education, because our government has the duty to prioritize our education. That's why the biggest budget in the Philippine government usually goes to the Department of Education. That's why we have invested in so much teachers, we have invested in buildings, we have invested in books, because our education must be prioritized. And under the Philippine Constitution, actually, under our rights, we have the right to education. And when you say the right to education, that's from elementary to secondary education. That should be free. That is a right. You have the right to study for free in elementary and secondary education. That's why you have been given priority to education. And in fact, one example of having a priority to education is giving free education, free college education to students in state universities. That's why in Negros Oriental State Universities, right now you're enjoying free education. You're not paying anymore for your tuition fees, because that's still one way of prioritizing education. And then, of course, we have paid so much for science and technology, for our arts, for our culture. We have given so much importance to our culture and arts. And we have also developed the sports in our nation. So that's why you have, as early as elementary years, you have been allowed to join in sporting activities. You have the division meets, provincial meets, what else? Provincial meets, and then the Palarong Babansa and other sporting events. Because we have given priorities to these, and they have always been saying that instead of you have to put emphasis on sports, because that's one way for you to stay away from drugs. You must look for some worthwhile activities, and sports has been seen in order to promote in order to develop you and for you to stay away from drugs. So you must be engaged in a lot of sports activities. So that's why you can also see in every barangays na yung mga basketball courts, no? And I think even right now, some of you are still playing volleyball and basketball, even if you're supposed to stay at home. So again, that's one of the things that is wanted to be promoted by our government, for you to enjoy sports, to develop yourselves, and gain different disciplines through sports. And again, we must remember that there must be priority to education, there must be priority to science and technology, to arts, to culture, and to sports. And arts and culture, I think one way of expressing our priority or our importance of our arts and culture is that we often celebrate the National Arts Month, and we usually celebrate that during February. So during that time, we have given so much importance to our artists here in the Philippines, and we have known so much national artists here in the Philippines. Now, hopefully, hopefully, one of you as students are just artistic enough to able to express yourselves. I think that's actually very important. Arts and culture is very important because, you know, you can express yourself through arts, through singing, through dancing, through creating poems, through writing. That's art. And if ever you will be able to promote, to develop your talents, then that would be very good. It will give you fame, it will give you money, hopefully, and you will be in a profession that you will really love because, you know, the arts and our culture is one of the most beautiful things that has been created in our nation. So it's very important for you to engage in those kinds of things, for you to fully appreciate our country, for you to fully appreciate you being your patriotism and to wake your nationalism inside you, and it is through arts and culture. So if ever you have talents, you must show them. If you have talent in singing, dancing, in writing, you must develop them because that's one way of giving back to your country and to giving back to your community. So that's it. That's another state principle. Again, we have to prioritize education, we have to prioritize science and technology, arts and culture, and sports. Oh, another thing. Let's talk about science and technology just a little bit because I just thought of it. This during the pandemic, we need to give more importance to science and technology because it is through our science and technology that we'll be able to make medicines, create medicines, create vaccines, and we can actually fight off a lot of viruses, a lot of diseases, if we are just we just develop our science and technology here in the Philippines. So that's why it's very important to have more scientists, to have more people engaged in biology, in chemistry, and in other fields of sciences because we can become a better nation because of that. And we're just very much thankful that there are nations with good science and technology that were able to develop these vaccines for us. You know, in order for us to stop the pandemic, we need science and technology because it is through science and technology that we're able to understand these diseases, the behaviors of these viruses, and for us to be able to find a cure or treatment on how to stop these diseases that we have. So again, that's one important factor. So that's why there's should be a need to prioritize science and technology. So we're just getting serious here, sorry. So the next principle, I think this would be the last state principle that I have included. Actually, there are a lot more state principles in the Philippine Constitution, but I think these are state principles that I have listed here are the ones that are very relatable to you as future teachers, and I think these are the ones that have more practical application to your daily lives as teachers. So you can actually read them more in the Philippine Constitution if you have the 1987 Philippine Constitution, but I have only just discussed the most important, the things that I find very important and that has a practical application to your daily lives. So now we have the last state policies that I'll be discussing is about the rights of indigenous cultural communities. So basically, it's very important to know that we must be able to preserve our culture here in the Philippines. And why is that so? Again, we've been talking about culture a lot, and I think a lot of you are already familiar on what is culture. But it's very, very important to preserve our heritage, our culture, because Our culture is our identities as Filipinos. It's the reason why we are unique. We are a unique race because we have this cultural communities here in the Philippines, and it's part of our culture. So we became a nation, a Philippine. We are the Filipino nation because we have cultures and traditions that we practice, and that made us unique. They made us a unique race. So because of that, I think that we have to understand that this cultural communities must be protected at all. So that's why under our Philippine Constitution, we should protect our ancestral domains. And when you say ancestral domains, these are the place or the areas where our the tribal Filipinos, tribes or indigenous tribes, have actual, continuous, and open possession. So, kanin mo yung area ko asas Lagapuyo. There were areas where they are actually living, they continue to live there, and they are in open possession. So, meaning, wala gitago ilang possession, ila yung ginapakita sa tanan. Everybody knows that they are in actual possession of these areas. So, that's why it's very important to protect this because it's part, the government has the responsibility to preserve our heritage. And one way of preserving our heritage is to protect the ancestral domains of our ancestral tribes or the tribal Filipinos. So that's why the ancestral domains must be protected at all times and must be given to these tribal communities here in our country. So that's it for our state principles. I hope that you have understood. And again, if you have questions, please comment down below so that I'll be able to answer them. Okay? Please do ask questions. Thank you. We have come now to the second part of our lesson 3, which is the citizenship. So when we're talking about citizenship, we're talking here about the Article 4, Section 1 of the Philippine Constitution. So this actually provides who are the Filipino citizens. So kinsa man ang mga citizens aning atong country. So as stated in Article 4, Section 1 of the Philippine Constitution, those who are citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, that's February 2, 1987. So when this Constitution had been adopted, and you are already a Filipino citizen under the 1935 or the 1973 Constitution, then you are automatically a Filipino citizen. And those who are born afterwards. So since we are all born at this time and we are still governed by the 1987 Constitution, then we are considered citizens of the Philippines. And then those whose fathers or mothers, are citizens of the Philippines, then those born before January 17, 1973 of Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority, and those who are naturalized in accordance with law. So we can, the second part where it says here, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines, we can actually talk about it later because I have another slide for it. For the third one, those born before January 17, 1973 of Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority, it has its basis on Section 1, Article 4 of the 1935 Constitution, because it provides that under the 1935 Constitution, those citizens are those whose mothers are citizens of the Philippines and upon reaching the age of majority elect Philippine citizenship. So why is that so? Because in this part, we're actually talking about interracial or interracial or international marriages or international families. So these are children born from Filipino mothers having a foreign father or foreigners from other country, and they have dual citizenship at the time, when they are born. So in this provision of the Constitution, they have provided that once these children each reach the age of majority, which is actually 18, the age of majority is actually 18. So once these children reach the age of majority, they can actually vote whether they can actually elect whether they should become Filipino citizens or citizens of the country where their father come from. And it's very important that I think it's very important to know there's actually that there's actually a significance why a Filipino is considered a natural born Filipino or a naturalized Filipino. So under the last part we have here, those who are naturalized in accordance with law. So those who have been naturalized are still citizens of the Philippines, but they are not natural born Filipinos but naturalized Filipinos. So when you say natural born Filipinos, are those Filipinos who did not do anything or did not go to courts or did not perform any acts in order to obtain Filipino citizenship. And in fact, those who are included in the third part, those who elect citizenship at the age upon reaching the age of majority, if ever they choose to become Filipino citizens, then they are already considered as natural-born Filipinos. But again, there's a difference between being a natural-born and a naturalized Filipino, because when you say naturalized Filipino, it means you have performed an act that would give you a citizenship, that would give you Philippine citizenship, and its significance would actually come in our elections, in our politics. So again, it's very important. If you want to engage in politics, you need to be a natural-born Filipino, because under our Constitution, the Philippine President, the Philippine Vice President, the members of the Senate, and the members of the House of Representatives, they must be natural-born Filipinos. So it's very important to consider a person a natural-born or a naturalized Filipino, because if you're just a naturalized Filipino citizenship, you acquired your citizenship through our naturalization laws in our country, then you cannot actually become a Philippine president. You cannot, you are disqualified from running into these positions in our government. You cannot run as a Philippine president, you cannot run as a Philippine vice president, you cannot run in the Congress, and you cannot run as a senator in the Philippines if you are a naturalized citizen of this country. However, if you are a natural born, then you are not disqualified. In fact, you are very much qualified to become the president of this nation, or the vice president, or a senator, or a congressman. So that's why it's very important to know if whether you are a natural born Filipino or not. And again, those natural born Filipinos are those who did not acquire did not perform any act to acquire Filipino citizenship, because they're already part of these provisions in the Constitution. Again, to reiterate, those who are citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, those fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines, and those born before January 17, 1973 of Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority. Again, although there's an act to that, but still they are considered as natural-born Filipino citizens. And let's proceed with the citizenship. So there are two modes of acquiring citizenship, the jus sanguinis or the jus soli. So just to give you a short explanation, jus sanguinis mean you acquire citizenship by blood, and that's what the second provision of our citizenship is all about. Because when you say born to a Filipino mother or to a Filipino father, then because you are born to a Filipino mother or a Filipino father, automatically you acquire citizenship of the Philippines, because through your blood relationship. Through your blood relationship, you have acquired Filipino citizenship. So upon being born, you are already considered a Filipino citizen, because either your father is a Filipino citizen or your mother is a Filipino citizen. On the other hand, we have the jus soli. When you say jus soli, you acquire citizenship in the place where you are born. So a very famous country that uses this principle, the jus soli principle in providing citizenship to these countries, is the country of USA. So regardless if you are a Filipino citizen, if you are actually born in the United States, since they follow the jus soli principle, anyone who is born in the United States of America are automatically citizens of United States of America. So because of that principle, because there's a congruent application, so meaning there's clash, no? Nagdungan sila, nagdungan in application, there's congruent application of these two laws, the jus sanguinis and the jus soli. That's the time we have dual citizenship. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you're a Filipino citizen, your mother is a Filipino and your father is a Filipino, or your mother is just a Filipino, and your father is an American citizen, and you are actually born in the United States of America, automatically you become both a Filipino citizen and an American citizen, because there's actually a a clashing, no, nagdungan. There's a clash of two laws. They are being applied together. So because of that, you become a dual citizen. You become a citizen of the United States, at the same time a citizen of the Filipino. But of course, you can always renounce. Here in the Philippines, under our law, if you want to become a natural-born Filipino and you have dual citizenship, you can always renounce your American citizenship. If you renounce your American citizenship, then you will become a natural-born Filipino, and you will be considered as a Filipino citizenship. A citizen only. Again, you can always, if you're a dual citizen, you can always renounce the other citizenship that you have, depending on where are you living. So again, they have two modes of acquiring citizenship: the jus sanguinis, meaning by blood. You acquire citizenship by your blood relationship. So if your father or mother is a Filipino, then automatically you are a Filipino. But there are countries such as the United States of America that is using the jus soli principle, which means you acquire citizenship not by the blood of your parents, but from where you are born. So if you are born in the United States of America, automatically you become an American citizen, regardless if you're Filipino, if your parents are Filipino citizens. So let's just talk about this. This is actually the last part of our talk about citizenship. So this is actually one of the most interesting jurisprudence on citizenship. This has been the case of Mary Grace Natividad S. Polia Manzares versus Comelec et al. So this is actually the very famous case of Grace Po, Senator Grace Po. We all know that she ran for presidency in the year 2016 when she was against Mar Rojas and President Duterte. And we all know that it was President Duterte who won the election. However, her candidacy was actually questioned during that time. It was an issue, a very hot issue at the time, because in the 2016 election, when she filed her candidacy for presidency, her citizenship was actually questioned. Because if you talk about the life story of Grace Po, under his case, if you talk about the life story of Grace Po, she was actually just she was an infant, and she was just actually found, meaning she was just a foundling. Nobody knew her parents, actually. So somehow she was just a foundling, and she was adopted. Those parents who she was adopted by those people who actually found her, and it was the couple Fernando Po Jr. and Susan Rosas. So they actually adopted Grace Po, and all throughout her life, she expected that she is actually a Filipino citizen, though she went to America and acquired American citizenship. But upon coming back here in the Philippines and becoming the MTRCB chairman, she actually renounced her American citizenship. So that's why she reacquired her Filipino citizenship. And under our laws, even if already became an American citizen, and once you come back here in the Philippines and you acquire your Filipino citizenship, automatically you are still considered a natural-born Filipino. So all the while, after Grace Po renounced her Filipino citizenship, after she renounced her American citizenship, all the while she thought that she was a natural-born Filipino, and that's why she said she is still qualified to run as the president of the Philippines. But there are a group of people who questioned her candidacy and questioned her qualification, given that they said that she is a foundling. And under the Philippine Constitution, there's no provisions there that said foundlings are actually considered as natural-born citizens of the country where they are found. So, since you are a foundling, nakit-an ra ka, nobody knew her parents because nobody appeared po. I think she tried to look for her parents po, but nobody appeared. And the thing is, since nobody appeared, so nobody can prove who are her real parents. So for those people who filed a petition against her candidacy, they think that foundlings, there are no provisions under our laws in the Philippine Constitution, and not even in our civil laws, that provides citizenship, or that provides that foundlings are natural-born Filipinos. So this case has been filed to the Supreme Court, questioning her citizenship. And under the law, it says and then our Supreme Court gave its judgment, and they said that foundlings are actually considered as citizens of the country where they are found. And they said that one of the reasons is on probability, because there is a high probability that both parents are Filipinos are being shown in her physical features, which are of typical Filipino. So meaning, ang features ni Grace po are actually of a Filipino. So because of that, there's a high probability that her parents are actually Filipinos. And that aside from the fact that she was found an infant in Haro, Iloilo, a municipality where there is 99%. So meaning, since 99% of the members of or 99% of the population of that town, Haro, Iloilo, are Filipinos, then of course, she is found in that area, then still there's another high probability that she is indeed a Filipino citizen. So these are circumstantial evidence. So again, one of the reasons why a foundling is considered as a Filipino citizen is because, number one, probably on the rule of probability, she has the features of a common Filipino. And second is she is found in a town, Daharo, Iloilo, where 99% of its population are Filipino citizens. So that's why she is considered as a Filipino citizen. And another reason that has been provided by the Supreme Court that considered her as a Filipino citizen is that the Supreme Court pronounced that foundlings are a class. So they are a different class. They are of their own. Class sila of their own. Foundlings are a class, natural-born citizens as based in the deliberation of the 1935 Constitutional Convention. So in the deliberation of the 1935 Constitutional Convention, though its enumeration is silent as to foundlings, there is no restrictive language either to definitely exclude the foundlings to the natural-born citizens. So again, they are not although in the Constitution it's silent as to according to the Supreme Court, although our Constitution is silent in our on the class of foundlings as to whether they're naturally born or not. But the thing is, they were not deliberately excluded by law. So we actually have a saying in law, a legal maxim that says what is excluded by law cannot be included. So meaning, if you are already deliberately excluded by law, you cannot be considered as one. But the thing is, under the Philippine Constitution, we are silent on foundlings. Although they are not they are silent, we are silent. There are provisions on the citizenship, but foundlings are not mentioned. But the thing is, even if our Constitution is silent on the class of foundlings, there is still no deliberate exclusion. They are not deliberately excluded in our Constitution, which means that because of that, they can be considered as Filipino citizens because they are not deliberately excluded in the Philippine Constitution. And the thing is, if we base it on probability, these foundlings are still Filipino citizens. So that's why race po is considered a natural-born Filipino regardless if foundlings are not actually specifically enumerated in the Constitution, whether they are natural-born citizens or not. But then they're not excluded. The law is silent, but they're not deliberately excluded. So they can be still considered as natural-born Filipinos. And another thing is that foundlings are automatically conferred with the natural-born citizenship as to the country where they are found, as covered and supported by the United Nations Convention law, or under the principle of international law. So basically, international law, under the international law, we actually, in the Philippine Constitution, we adhere to the generally accepted principles of natural law, and they actually form part of the law of the land, although they're not considered as laws, municipal laws, but we adhere to these provisions of international law. So basically, because we adhere to the provisions, generally accepted provisions of the international law, they form part of our laws in their lands. And because of that, we have considered international law in the deliberation of this case of Grace Po. And you have under the international law, foundlings, those as the same case of Grace Po, katong mga bata nga nakitaan ra with no parents at all, are considered as citizens of the countries where they come from. So again, under the principle of international law, foundlings are citizens of the country where they've come from. So that's why Grace Po is still a Filipino citizen. Again, let me just remind you again the 3 reasons why a foundling can be considered as a citizen of the country, a natural-born citizen, is number 1, probability. And on Grace Po's situation, the probability is that she's a Filipino because her features are of a Filipino citizen, and that she was found in a town where 99% of the population is Filipino. And then another reason is that under the deliberation in the Constitutional Convention for the 1935 Constitution, although although the provisions of the Constitution are silent as to the class of foundlings, but still we did not deliberately excluded them as Filipino citizens. So that made them a citizen, natural-born Filipinos. And finally, if we adhere to the provisions we adhere to the generally accepted principles of the international law, then we can actually say that foundlings are actually citizens of the country where they are found. Again, foundlings are considered as citizens of the country where they are found. So because of that, Mary Grace Po Lamanzares, or Grace Po, Senator Grace Po, because of this case, she won this case, and she is actually because of this, under the Supreme Court, she is considered as a natural-born Filipino, and because of that, she is qualified to run as a president because she is still a natural-born Filipino. So again, that's the beauty of our laws because we have to argue. Because of this kind of arguments, we um, issues in our countries are properly presented and that people would better understand because we are able to hear from two different sides. So in every issue there's always different sides, and because of this we're able to hear some reasonings and some valid arguments. And I think I think one of the best jurisprudence that we ever had in relation to citizenship, because then again, those who have less in laws must have more in life, and those who have less in life must have more in laws. And the thing is, foundlings are just unfortunate because they did not ask for their parents to be born at all, but the thing is they were actually born, and it's just very irresponsible for these parents to actually throw away their children. And once these children will grow up without having family figure, who will protect them, diba? So it's better if under the laws these kind of people are actually protected. And as foundlings, this is one way of protecting them by giving them Filipino citizenship, by considering them as natural-born Filipinos, because you have been given them rights. And since they are considered as Filipino citizens, then they can enjoy the right that every Filipino citizen is actually enjoying. So that's it. That's very important. You must know your citizenship, because there are rights that are provided to you. And once you are a Filipino citizen, you can acquire a lot of rights under the Philippine Constitution. And that's why this jurisprudence is very important, because it gives rights to foundlings, those children who are just born, or those children who are just found just anywhere. Mga bata nakita sa kilid sa kalsada, kay panglabay sa mga irresponsible na parents, or basi ka ng mga parents ani are so poor that they cannot feed themselves, that they have to give away their children. And that's so sad. So that's why, in order for us to protect them, the first thing that we must do is to grant them citizenship. And we have granted them Philippine citizenship. And once they acquire Filipino citizenship, then that's the time to enjoy the benefits and the privileges of being a Filipino as granted in our Philippine Constitution. So that's the beauty of our law, that's the beauty of our jurisprudence, and I hope you're able to understand this lecture. So that ends my discussion for lesson 3. Hopefully you have learned a lot of things and you'll know how to apply those things that I have lectured in your daily lives, because I think these laws really have practical applications. So for you to be able to share that lessons to your student, you yourselves must also know how to apply them in the daily life. So I also hope that you have taken down notes, because again, those things that I have lectured will come out in your midterm examination. And just better prepare for your midterm examination, because I'll be doing something different. So it's one of the best exams you could have ever taken, I think. And aside from that, please do take care of yourselves, take care of your family, and take care of your community. Again, we have responsibility not only for ourselves but for the people around us. So right now, I think it's better if you practice that responsibility by staying at home. Again, stay at home. We have surging cases here in our province, so it's better if you just stay at home and study more and do things that could improve your studies, could improve your talents, and could improve your skills. Again, I thank you so much for listening to my lecture. Again, if you have questions, please do comment down below. Again, I've been saying this when I was in college. Smart people always ask questions because they are intelligent enough to want to know more. So again, if you think you're smart, I'm challenging you, ask questions, because I don't think I was able to cover everything. So if you have questions, some things that need to be clarified, always ask me. You can always PM me. You can always send me a message in my email, and I will gladly answer your questions. It's very impossible that you don't have any questions, or else I will be making your exam very difficult if you will not ask questions, okay? So thank you so much. Have a nice day and stay at home.